it's Sarah from Empowered Mothers Network, helping mothers to be the best version of themselves. This is episode 27, and this episode is called The Radical Power of Rest, Why Slowing Down is the Key to Thriving. So, you might be able to tell from, it's dark in here, right? I think this podcast, if you're watching it on YouTube, that is 2 weeks behind at the moment, sort of me recording it to it going out. So, you know, it's like mid-January now. It is dark when I'm recording this, and I have my light on here, but it's not doing a great lot. So, you know, if you're watching on YouTube, you'll be able to see that. Another point, obviously, you might be able to hear that my voice is pretty, like, gnarly right now, because yeah, we've had the flu kind of rip through our house, and I'll talk a bit more about that in a minute. But yeah, I'm not sure how far I'm going to get through this podcast episode without my voice giving up, so I may have to keep stopping for sips of tea, but we will get there. So there is an irony probably in me saying that as well during this podcast episode, because it is about rest. And I think from what's been going on with me and my family over like the Christmas period, in terms of like illness and really being forced to rest, that was something that's kind of I've been dealing with a lot myself directly at the moment. So I wanted to talk a little bit more about it, because I'm seeing it as something that's playing out with other people too. So, talking about rest, I mean, what is the first thing that kind of springs to mind for you when you talk about rest? You know, is it something that comes easily to you, or is it something that, you know, you feel like you need more of, you don't have enough of it and you'd love more? Does it bring up guilt? You know, there's a lot of different feelings rest can bring up within people. And I think as well, as a mother, we find real challenges in kind of finding the time to rest, and taking that time to rest amongst like the endless demands and to-dos that there are. So I know, again, I've talked in previous podcasts about things that can be difficult for mothers because there's so much going on in terms of the busyness. And rest is definitely something that a lot of mums will kind of put to the side, and especially for their own rest needs as well, even put those at the bottom of kind of the family pile, if you will. Essentially, rest is often really overlooked or undervalued in society today, and I'm going to talk a little bit more about that in a minute as well. But you know, it's not something that's really promoted so much. It's getting a little bit more, I guess if you go on social media and things nowadays, it's getting a little bit more like you should rest, you know, and kind of promoting that side of it. But at the same time, there's this kind of cultural narrative that really runs deep, that's been there for a long time, that really just goes against the whole concept of resting. And so, yeah, as I said at the beginning of the podcast, our family over Christmas, which was a couple of weeks ago now, we all got knocked down with whatever, I think there's a flu bug going around or something. It's a particularly nasty one this year, because I don't particularly get ill too much, or if I do, it goes quite quickly. But yeah, it really knocked me down as well, and it knocked my partner and my kids down. It's like one by one dominoes. So yeah, Christmas holidays was really like a time where we just got, you know, you're pushed, and I think a lot of people do as well. You know, you're so busy over Christmas, and there's so much going on in the build to Christmas, and then you just kind of get pushed into this, right, you are going to chill, you are going to rest. There's not really any choice, because this is the time when we often pick up like the really nasty winter bugs. So for our family, it was a case of, you know, we were all ill, one after the other as well. So, you know, even if you're kind of feeling better and think, oh, I could probably start getting out and about a bit more now, but then somebody else that you'd have to care for would then be really ill with it. So you can't just drag everybody out on a walk where like 2/5 of them cannot get off the sofa. So it's really like often, I think, we get to that point of physical illness, don't we, where often that's like the inauguration into deep rest, because I don't know, well, for me personally, I have a thing where, mentally I'm like, okay, I will take rest if I need it. And especially when I work cyclically as well with like the menstrual cycle and certain points in my cycle where it's like, yeah, okay, I need to rest. But then my concept intellectually of rest is maybe not quite meeting up with the concept and the amount of rest that like my body, my soul needs. That's a lot deeper. So yeah, there's been this recent thing, and I think for a lot of us over a winter period as well, where we really are either called to go into deep rest, or we might not listen and we get forced into it through illness. And honestly, yeah, resting for me is something that I really do struggle with, really do. And it's one of these things where you can chat about it, and it doesn't mean you've got all the answers and you're above this. And that's what drives me nuts with like gurus on social media and whatnot, when they come across as, this is a problem. I have dealt with this problem. Now I'm going to tell you how to deal with this problem. No, okay, right. I struggle really badly with actually accepting and letting myself rest, and it's an ongoing process. And I have made, to be fair, I think after this winter particularly has really kicked me in the nuts about it, but I'm still not, I'm not mentally on that level where my body necessarily wants to be for deep rest at this time of year. But I am feeling, and we've talked about this as well in episode 24 about the seasons of motherhood and the different seasons we go through, and when we're in that kind of winter season, how we really are called to rest. And when you sort of sync up with them seasons, and start being more aware of them for a start, and then trying to pay attention to them and trying to flow a little bit more with them, it naturally comes to you that you start to almost unconsciously recognize that you need to slow down and rest. And I think that helps to kind of flow with those cycles. That helps the resistance that inevitably comes up when you have been conditioned not to rest. So this is probably the number one reason why we avoid resting, which is what I want to talk about next. So I think there is so much of a societal structure that like glorifies productivity and busyness, that kind of masculine, you want to call it masculine orientated mindsets, call it the patriarchy, whatever you want to term it as. The way that society is, we are not set up to take out time and rest. We have been raised in a culture where it's kind of more and more as the years have passed, we're like set to on 24/7. People will work full time and then come home and check emails and don't switch off, and we just got to keep busy doing. So yeah, for most of us, when we come across this aspect of like really deeply resting, it is through physical illness, whether that's like say a viral infection like flu that's knocked us for six, or where there is another health condition that may be, something's been off in our body and our body's been trying to communicate with us and we haven't got the memo, and then it's got further down the line and something has materialised as more of a serious health problem that really just causes us to not be able to carry on as we were. So for me, it's like that cultural concept is really the main reason, I think, why we don't rest, because we've just simply been conditioned not to. We've been conditioned to believe that like rest is lazy and it is weak or it is selfish, because I think probably all of us will remember as teenagers when we were going through so much, like physically, mentally, emotionally, and we wanted to sleep more, and many of us got told off for staying in bed too long, sleeping in too late, being lazy, come on, get out of bed, and all of this. It's just something that's been ongoing as a culture in society, we don't accept these phases of life where we do need to slow down, where we do need to take our foot off the gas pedal. And then if we are in a phase of life where we need to do so, we're kind of, pushed to one side. We're not as useful to the system, essentially, because we're not making so much of a productive output. And that is sad. And for me, as well as a lot of other people I know, there's a certain amount of anger in that why is that the way things are? And that's, a story for another podcast, or probably a lot deeper than I can go in today. But I think the tides are starting to turn, and especially as women, we are starting to realise how important resting is for us, and get past this narrative we've been told that, somehow it makes us weaker in a way, or lazy or something like that for taking time out to rest. And this concept that as a mother in society, your default is to always be busy, to always be on, either working or child rearing or doing something in the house. There's always 2001 things to do. And this busy culture for me as well is something I'm trying to slowly unpick. I find that I can, just fill any kind of time. You get that wonderful child-free time. You can fill it with this, that and the other, and it just disappears. And there gets to be a point where you have to kind of step back and say, okay, am I using this time usefully? Is it balanced? Is it, am I feeling balanced in my personal life as a whole? Or am I just filling it with busyness, which is essentially like another form of procrastination? So for me, it was realising that I am filling it too much with this. I feel like I need to be productive. I need to get this, that and the other done. I don't know who I'm trying to prove this to. Only myself. And it's really trying to pick that apart and, look at what the truth is of that situation. Is it that I need to get all these things done? Or is it that I'm trying to justify my own existence in some way? Trying to prove myself, trying to avoid something as well. I think as well for women, there is a period as you go deeper into resting, deeper than this part of resting I was interested in, which is maybe, having an early night or whatever. But going into that really deep rest, I think that's where the medicine is, and that's where there is some serious wisdom. And I've been finding that personally as I've been trying to surrender a little bit more into it. And I think we avoid that now. I don't think we necessarily avoid that consciously, but we do tend to avoid that as women. It's almost like subconsciously we know where that's where all the power lies, and we're kind of dancing around that, probably because again of years of kind of cultural conditioning and being disconnected from our feminine wisdom and gifts and things like that. So I think that's a few reasons why we avoid resting, or the main reasons why most of us avoid deep rest. And so if we want to invite a bit more rest into our life, there are ways we can kind of do that now, because honestly, waiting for yourself to get absolutely knocked out by a nasty illness or ended up with a long-standing health condition, which you then have to go on to manage, is not really the best way to want to consciously kind of integrate rest into your life. But as I say, many of us really, we're getting slapped in the face and shoved right into this now. If you're into like astrology, I'm doing a course on the moment about like astroherbalism, and going through the different archetypes and aspects of the planets, and Saturn is like the big one. Saturn is boundaries and this kind of tyrannical father, the the routines, boundary structures, that kind of archetype to Saturn. And it also gives us the massive life lessons and kind of slaps us in the face and puts the problem right there. It says, you're going to sort this out, right? Okay, you got to deal with this. So this is a bit like when we kind of have relied too much on that Saturnian energy for too long in terms of routine and structures and productivity, and then suddenly it slaps us in the face and says, actually, you need to go and get rebalanced, sort yourself out, go and get some rest. So how do we do that? As I mentioned before, and that was something that we talked about in episode 24 with the Living Seasonally themed podcast, is that integrating and connecting with nature's cycles. For me, that's, probably been one of the biggest things, really. You know, I've kind of approached rest as, all right, I need to rest a bit more. You know, on the intellectual level, on the thinking mind, we all probably have that thought, and I've had that myself. And honestly, has it made a difference in terms of how much I rest? Probably not, really. For me, it was greater just, going about it a little bit more subliminally and just more tying into monitoring cycles, aligning with cycles, kind of. It just seems to flow easier, and then it starts flowing into your life. And maybe you don't notice at first, but then it starts building up. And I think that's an easier way to do things. You've not got the resistance of, again, when we go in with the thinking mind, I'm going to rest more, and then we end up, the results are we haven't. And then we are really, then in resistance against that thinking mind and that thought process. There's resistance there because where we're at is not where mentally we are expecting to be. So yeah, aligning seasonally, accepting, maybe as it's winter time at the moment, that there are things we can do, ways we can rest more. Maybe we start on a practical level, going to bed a little earlier, or having more of a wind down routine before bed. Taking screens away, having a bit of a routine where, like, I've got a little aromatherapy roll on with lavender and chamomile, reading a bit of a book or some kind of nighttime routine just to wind down before bed. But yeah, essentially overall, recognising that when we are in quieter seasons now, like the winter time, that we kind of just adopt a slower pace as standard. Scheduling less appointments and activities and things in, staying at home more, just being slower, going at a slower pace. If we have a certain pace for work or whatever, maybe slowing down. And obviously, if you do work in for an employer or in some kind of systematic setup like that, then there's only so much you can do with slowing down, because you don't obviously want to get yourself fired, or do you? I don't know, but there may be repercussions of slowing down your working productivity rate at work. So, choosing what kind of works for you. But as well as having this kind of seasonal rest, which is nice to lean into, is just to kind of, even if you can find like little micro rests in your day, and I talk about micro habits a lot, and that ties in with the micro habits, is just finding little rests. So one that I used to do when the youngest was a baby, and because the first two were quite good sleepers, the boy was just rubbish, really. He wasn't a good sleeper, so I was, pretty much zombified during the day. For me, the best rest I found then was as he sort of got into a regular nap time, especially the after lunch one. I would put him down for a nap, and I would go and do just a 10-minute meditation without the expectation of, like, I'm going to go to sleep now. But I'd do a 10-minute meditation, and that really helped in terms of rest. So some days, I would just conk out for 10 minutes, maybe even longer sometimes. But some days I wouldn't fall asleep, but being in that kind of slowed brainwave state and meditative state actually helps me kind of zone out and feel actually a bit rested afterwards as well. So that was definitely the best one I found. So things like that are kind of like your quick wins. Most people can fairly easily find 5 or 10 minutes in the day where they can just say, I'm just gonna have a sit down, just gonna have a stop, just gonna have a break, just gonna have a bit of zonk. The harder part and the more longer term part and the changes that are going to make like the biggest results in terms of deep rest, and the point that many of us, I say, are at now with either being flawed by illness, physical illness, and maybe having long-term health conditions, is the concept of like reassessing your lifestyle as it is. So this is not, again, it doesn't go in with the productivity, how quick I will tick this off my to-do list and it's done. It's a big job, it's messy. You may find there's places in your life where you have to do things you don't want to, or have to not do things that you don't not want to. But like, if you really look at your life, and is there areas where maybe unnecessary busyness can be reduced, or something where maybe intuitively you're doing something, or you've got a relationship with a certain person where it's really draining you, and this is significantly contributing to the lack of rest, the exhaustion that you're feeling. So this is real work, and it really requires you to sort of take really get honest with yourself, and really take a look at yourself and your lifestyle, and just to kind of assess if it's actually working for you. Some people naturally will have busier lives than others, so this isn't an area where we can really compare ourselves with somebody else of a similar lifestyle, like another mother, or somebody of the same gender, or somebody of a similar age. It's not something that you can just compare like for like. It is very unique to you, particularly if you identify as neurodivergent, for example, then you're probably going to be somebody who needs to incorporate more, not necessarily rest into your schedule, but more kind of downtime, quieter time. And that was something that, I think for years I kind of compared myself to other people in a similar place, and why can they all kind of, they're all going out doing this, that and the other, why I just can't really. I'd just be exhausted. Like if I go out to a social thing, I couldn't do 2 social events the day after next to each other, because I just have to recover the next day. So yeah, you don't try and compare yourself to other people and where they're at. It's got to be personalised, and it's got to be you. And there may be an element, these beliefs and thoughts will come up and say, well, why do I need to take more rest here, or why should I, because other people don't do that. But that's falling into the comparison trap, and it doesn't really help or benefit you in any way. I think we've just kind of got to lay it out on the table, be honest, how you are, how you work in the world, and where maybe it's just your physical body's maybe telling you, okay, this is too much for this body, this is too much for this soul. So up to this point, I've talked about why we avoid rest, how we can start to bring it into our lives, and the main point of rest, we know, is often on the physical level. It's our physical bodies wanting that rest to kind of repair and renew. And I think maybe we don't always talk about the other benefits of rest as well. So beyond the kind of physical rejuvenation. And this is something I've found over this winter as I've kind of forcibly been chucked into the abyss of deep rest. and also read about it more, being more aware of it, giving it greater bandwidth in my life, looking out how I can try and invite it in and not push it away, essentially. So what I've discovered is that one of the benefits of rest, particularly when connecting with like the feminine energy, which we've also talked about in another podcast, is that there is a greater, in the deep rest, there is a greater connection to that intuitive part of ourselves, listening to our inner voice. So again, you might call that intuition, you might call that connecting with divine feminine energy, whatever you want to term it as. I think if you're looking for that in your life, then often moving towards or into this place of deep rest is often a place where you can start to connect with that knowing, that wisdom, that voice, that intuitive wisdom that's kind of inherent within us, and we don't necessarily always hear it until we really stop what we're doing, stop with the busyness of the outside world and really go within and tune in. We can also find our creative selves in there as well. So yeah, something again from my own personal perspective was that as I rested, and I'm getting annoyed with resting because I'm not producing, I'm not doing the action, I'm not doing the masculine side of things, but I am actually, once I push through the discomfort and the resistance to rest, finding the feminine side of things, and really finding that kind of creative stirring inside. So I might not be in a part of life or a part of time where I'm actively creating and doing the action, but I'm connecting more to the creative spark and the ideas and the intuition within myself, and kind of nurturing that so it's growing, so that actually when we do get to spring and we do get to the point where it's like, hey, it's all time to come out now and do something with this, it's actually, we've given it time to build up, we've given the creativity, we've given it time to kind of stir the pot and see what's in there and sit with ideas as well, not just run off with them and go do, but we've took time to really sit with things and percolate and really know ourselves and our creative ideas before we go and throw them out into the world. So that aspect of rest for me has really been something that kind of then makes me want to go a little deeper into that, look a little more into it, as well as still feeling a bit like, you know, that nagging voice in your head, like, I'm not doing anything, I've not got anything done. It's always, it's still there, and I'm sitting with that, but I'm not necessarily giving it full on airtime and listening to nothing but that now. So yeah, that side of creative intuition, and obviously the physical benefits, so improved physical health, because we're actually honouring I can't even say honouring with a blocked up nose, honouring the body's need to recharge, and you know, reducing our stress levels as well by taking time out for deep rest, and giving ourselves greater emotional resilience as well. I think just taking that time to rest and recharge. So yeah, I've seen this quote popping up in various forms on social media and whatnot quite a lot more recently, as people are starting to move into looking at rest as more of deep rest as more of a necessity. This quote says, "Rest is not a luxury, it is a form of resistance, self-love and empowerment." So I think a lot of us are starting to see it as that now, which is useful. But what worries me in terms of that is that, again, if we're approaching it solely with the thinking mind, we feel like then we kind of get to call the shots on taking rest, when we take it, how much of rest we take, when it's not really the case of how it truly works and truly helps us to recharge. Also as well, I think a lot of the publicity now with rest still ties back into that kind of capitalist society, where it's like, oh, you need to rest more. You need this product, you know. You need this stuff. You need to buy this stuff for the bath, or you need to buy this. What's that one I keep saying? Like some kind of UV face mask, and it just looks. Have we seen that on social media adverts? It's like a UV. Oh, it's not UV, is it? It's like a ultra. It's some kind of light face mask, basically. I don't know if it's UV or rays or not. But infrared maybe. And it looks terrifying. Oh my God, it looks terrifying. But you know, it's self-care, so buy it. So that kind of side of things, it's difficult because things are, I think, old ways and old traditions now, and things that are useful for us to remember are sort of coming to the fore now, and they're being remembered and they're being talked about more, which is great. But at the same time, sometimes they're taken and put into this like capitalist consumerism model, and then we're just back to the start again, aren't we, of the cycle of problems. But yeah, choosing rest where you can, in a society that glorifies overworking. Again, being on a practical level, you know, it's not always as simple as saying, well, I'm overworked at my job, so I'm just going to work slower, if it was that easier. But, you know, there's ways and means to do certain things, and, you know, if we're in that kind of job, then okay, it might be that we just need to look at it from a different angle and say, is that the job that we need to continue being in? If there's no way to kind of change the goalpost, as it were, from within the role itself. And essentially as well, embracing rest, again, as we've talked about in other podcasts with other behaviours, we're modelling that behaviour for our own children. Our children are seeing us do that. It's seeing us say, you know what, I'm going to take a bit of time out and just have some time to rest, because it's a time of year where I need to take a bit more rest. And then, you know, that becomes the norm in your family, your household. Then your kids see that as normal, and as they grow up, they'll, I guess, naturally, hopefully, take a bit more time out over these kind of winter periods, or seasonally maybe. You know, we never know what's going to pan out in our kids' lives, but to be able to model like healthy behaviours from the start is a really good beginning for them, I think. So hopefully that has helped in terms of looking at rest a little bit differently. Again, it's an ongoing process, and my God, it's an ongoing process for me. Oh, I'm terrible. I one step forward with it, two steps back sometimes, but I am trying to rest and listen, because I have seen that there are certainly gifts in that, and I think it's an important thing to bring into our lives, especially now, in the current state of the world, especially now. So this week, if you can find one moment each day to just pause and rest, you know, even if it is like the 10-minute meditation, or 10 minutes just sit in your chair, or it's coffee time, I'm not going to drink it flying around. I found actually really good for if I'm drinking a coffee in like a proper cappuccino mug, like the big wide ones, then I can't like charge around with the coffee because it'll just spill everywhere. And that really forces me, when I've got it in that mug, just to sit down and actually be present with the coffee. So that's actually quite a good one. If you have it in a big mug and then you just kind of sit and be present with the coffee and rest it just for the time you're drinking the coffee, basically. And yeah, trying to find a little bit of time this week to do that without, or being mindful of when the guilt comes in, because I can't say, oh, don't feel guilty, because it will creep in, but kind of just sitting with it whilst it does and saying, well, I'm going to do this anyway. So that's the challenge for this week. So hopefully you can find a little bit of time for inviting rest in whatever way. And maybe you feel you're ready to start unpicking aspects of your life to look at where you can change your lifestyle, or maybe that's a job for, a few more weeks down the line when we're kind of getting more towards spring and more getting towards action taking. You could kind of percolate on a few ideas now and maybe think about taking action a bit further on in the year. So, as ever, let me know if you've got any comments on this episode. You can comment below if you're watching on YouTube, or you can comment on the Facebook page or Instagram page, which is at Empowered Mothers Network. If you haven't joined the network and signed up for the fortnightly EMN journal, then please do. You can sign up either Facebook, Instagram, or on the website empoweredmothersnetwork.com, and you will get the fortnightly EMN journal there, which is growing fortnightly. Goes out fortnightly on Monday and has like latest podcast episode, local events, kind of, I would say like Lake District, Yorkshire Dales, kind of, because I'm smack bang in the middle of the two at the moment. It's more on that. And we also have a spotlight feature starting up for local mums, particularly local mums running a business, and just sort of featuring people like that. So if you want to be included in that and maybe promote yourself and your business at the same time for free, then get in touch, join the journal, join the network. We're all in it together. We're all going to go and get some rest, and I will see you for the next podcast episode.